Welcome. This is an ongoing podcast series on natural law and consciousness. We've been looking at chaos sorcery. Today we're looking at the 9/11 event and aspects of how it was an inside job, and also aspects of the human sacrifice element of 9/11. I wish to acknowledge Mark Passio for his podcast, What on Earth is Happening? Also, Jordan Maxwell, David Icke, and Michael Tessarian, who are experts on symbolism. They've all provided valuable information that has allowed me to put this presentation together. The 9/11 sacrifice ritual was a covert black operation of intelligence agencies to maintain American military global hegemony and to increasingly usurp the freedom of the American people. Dark occultists are at the highest levels of the intelligence agencies. They are sending a message to other elites throughout the world that through the 9/11 sacrifice that you will either go along with the Pax Americana agenda because we are willing to sacrifice our own people, and we will not have a problem about sacrificing you and cutting you out if you do not go along. Fear is the force that shuts down consciousness, so that even a person in fear cannot understand the events that are happening. The false flag black operation attack of the trade centers was to maintain American geopolitical dominance into the 21st century and to rebuild defenses, the military. The Project for the New American Century, PNAC, is a think tank of elite Zionists and neocons who were involved in the planning of foreign policies and war scenarios. PNAC wrote a letter in 1999 signed by Donald Rumsfeld, Cheney, Wolfowitz, Dov Zakheim, asking President Clinton to invade Iraq. Dov Zakheim ran a charity supporting Osama bin Laden and ran a company that produced remote control aircraft. $2.6 trillion of American taxpayers' money went missing on September the 10th, the day before 9/11. Maintaining American dominance in the world into the 21st century. It's in September 2000, PNAC produced a document called Rebuilding America's Defenses, Strategy, Forces, and Resources for the New Century. In Section 5, it's titled Maintaining America's Dominance of the World. It says, to preserve American military preeminence in the coming decades, the Department of Defense must move more aggressively to experiment with new technologies and operational concepts and seek to exploit the emerging revolution in military affairs. Information technologies are becoming more prevalent and significant components of the modern military. These information technologies are having the same kind of transforming effects on military affairs as they were having in the larger world. The effects of this military transformation will have profound implications for how wars are fought, what kinds of weapons will be used, will dominate the battlefield, and which nations will enjoy military preeminence. The United States enjoys every prospect of leading this transformation. Indeed, it was the improvements and capabilities acquired during the American defense build-up of the 1980s that hinted at and then confirmed during Operation Desert Storm that a revolution in military affairs was at hand. At the same time, the process of military transformation will present opportunities for America's adversaries to develop new capabilities that will in turn create new challenges for the US military preeminence. Moreover, the Pentagon, contained by limited budgets and current pressing missions, has seen funding for experimentation and transformation crowded out in recent years. Spending on research and development has been reduced dramatically over the past decade. Indeed, during the mid-80s, when the Defense Department was in the midst of the Reagan build-up, it is necessary change is likely to be along the lines of some catastrophic and catalyzing event like a new Pearl Harbor. Domestic politics and industrial policy will shape the pace on content of transformation as much as a requirement of current missions. This report advocates a two-stage process of change, transition, and transformation over the coming decades. End quote. Now you can hear in this document, it's essentially telling the Defense Department that unless there is a new Pearl Harbor, in other words, a false flag attack, then we will not be able to garner the funding we need to create this transformation in the American armed forces so that we can maintain military preeminence throughout the world. In other words, a global empire. They were calling for a Pax Americana of world hegemony. Military counterintelligence wargames exercises were conducted on September 11, 2001. NORAD, the North American Defense Command, did nothing to stop the planes as they approached the towers. The Black Operations Network needed to run wargames on the day of September the 11th, 2001 to confuse and distract anyone in the military who was not part of this New World Order agenda. Whenever a commercial jet diverts from its approved flight path, it creates a potential deadly hazard. It could collide with another airplane. So the job of the military is to quickly respond. The war games exercises were being run by Dick Cheney. Testimony from Norman Mineta confirms that they had foreknowledge of the planes coming to the Pentagon before it hit, and they did nothing to stop it, in the same way that NORAD did nothing to stop the planes coming in to hit the trade towers. Now, NORAD were confused by these intelligence operations, the so-called drills, the war games. So they didn't understand that the planes that were coming in to hit the towers were not part of this drill. Whether they were real events or exercises, the war games served to confuse people as to real-world events of the planes approaching the trade towers. The question has been asked, well, who orchestrated the events of September 11? The answer would be the same people that put the war games into place. The instigators of war games exercises, they must have had foreknowledge of the events that unfolded. The laws of physics cannot be broken. Those buildings did not collapse from the planes hitting them. Especially they cannot be broken 3 times in one day. Planes could not have caused the freefall collapse of the buildings. And Building 7 wasn't even hit by a plane. Now, buildings do not collapse symmetrically into their own footprint. That is the greatest path of resistance. If it is going to collapse, it will do so around the weakened part of the structure and topple over. The Twin Towers were constructed with these huge steel columns. They were constructed with support columns. These columns failed all at once, causing the building to collapse in on itself, in its own footprint. And this is impossible to happen due to an impact near the top of the building. The controlled demolition aspect of these events was most obvious with Building 7. Now, there were other buildings in between the trade towers and Building 7 that were not hit by debris. They didn't collapse. You could see Building 7 collapse from a controlled demolition, and it crumpled into its own footprint. And there was no reason for Building 7 to collapse because it was a fair distance from the towers and wasn't hit by anything that might have caused it to collapse. The demolition operation was run from Building 7, and the evidence there needed to be destroyed. These buildings crumpled into dust as they collapsed. The way these buildings collapse is by supposed impact. Well, it's not possible according to the laws of physics. The three buildings had to collapse. Building 7 had to collapse to make the occult ritual aspect of it complete, even though nothing actually hit it. We were told that the fireballs from the explosion melted the steel and caused the buildings to collapse. The fireballs from the planes were not hot enough to weaken the steel structure because jet fuel is kerosene and it burns at a temperature of up to 700 degrees Celsius. Steel melts at 1482 Celsius. If kerosene burnt at a temperature that would damage steel and iron, then kerosene stoves, heaters, lighting would not be possible without melting the burner. The floors did not pancake one onto another because the towers were constructed by vertical steel columns and not concrete slabs, as we were led to believe. So we were told that the planes were incinerated in the fireball of the explosion. Nothing could have survived that explosion, right? Yet somehow, the red bandana and passport of one of the hijackers, Mohammed Atta, drifted into the hands of law enforcement officials. Even skeptical people would have to admit that this was the planting of false evidence at the crime scene. How does laminated plastic survive a fireball that was supposed to have disintegrated millions of tons of steel and concrete? A BBC report was announcing the collapse of Building 7, yet in the live footage you could see Building 7 was still standing. Obviously she was reading from a script that had anticipated the collapse of Building 7. She had read that script prematurely before the building actually came down. It is possible that Building 7 was supposed to be hit by Flight 93 that crashed in Pennsylvania. The Patriot Act is 1,000 pages. It was written prior to 9/11 and was previously not accepted by Congress. However, after the attacks on the Trade Center, the Patriot Act was passed almost unanimously. The Patriot Act allows for mass surveillance and detainment without trial, a massive loss of human freedom. This concludes part 1 of the inside job aspects of 9/11. Next time we will look at the gematria, or the numerology surrounding the events of 9/11.